Hello and welcome everyone. So in this video I'm going to talk about price controls, price ceilings and price floors, and I'll talk a little bit about quantity regulations. And I sure hope my puppy is done barking, so I don't know. Here's a price ceiling, or here's our definitions. A price ceiling is a maximum price that sellers can charge. Price floor is a minimum price that sellers can charge. And the logic here is so the price ceiling just prevents you from going any higher. Think of like literally a ceiling. The ceiling prevents you from going above that amount. You can be anywhere in the room below the ceiling. You just can't go through the ceiling. Same thing with the floor. You can be anywhere in the room above the floor. You just can't go below the floor. So that's exactly how price ceilings and price floors work. Is it stops the price from going any higher in the case of a price ceiling, stops the price from going any lower in the case of a price floor. What are some markets where governments have imposed price restrictions? The most obvious would be during the pandemic or during other disasters. There's anti-price gouging laws. Those are price ceilings, preventing the prices on necessities from rising more than, say, 10% from what it was before the disaster. Common price floor to think about would be like the minimum wage. All right, so binding price ceiling. So binding price ceiling is one that prevents the market from reaching the market equilibrium. Remember, I said a price ceiling, you can be anywhere in the room. The ceiling prevents you from going higher. The ceiling's typically not a binding constraint on our behavior, right? You don't typically have problems not going through the ceiling. So the ceiling in a room is typically a non-binding constraint. Now, if you get on a trampoline and you set up a trampoline indoors, it's a bad idea, and you jump and you hit the ceiling, now you've run into a binding constraint, right? It's prevented you from going any higher. The binding price ceiling is going to prevent you from reaching, it prevents the market from reaching the equilibrium, right? So if you jump and then you let yourself hit the ground, like you just jump and grab your legs or whatever, and boom, you hit the ground, gravity's trying to bring you through the floor doesn't let it happen, right? The floor constrains gravity's behavior on your body, right? Now the floor, once you run up against the floor, becomes a binding constraint, right? The floor analogy doesn't work as well because like it's always kind of like we're always kind of on the, most of us are walking around most of the time with our feet on the floor. So anyway, the binding price ceiling, the ceiling prevents the market from reaching the market equilibrium price. It's the highest price sellers can charge. It becomes the highest price. The highest price sellers can charge is the price ceiling. If it's below the equilibrium price, now it becomes binding. The reason why is it's like, suppose the equilibrium is on the next floor and I can't get there because the ceiling's keeping me from there. That's what happens with a price ceiling. It's not, the equilibrium might be higher, but you're not allowed to go any higher. So for instance, like during the pandemic, right, early days, there is a sort of a rush on paper towels and hand sanitizer. The true equilibrium price for a paper towel roll might have been $50, right? Or $50 for a pack of a dozen or whatever, but nobody was allowed to sell at that price. Or like Amazon was stopping people from selling beyond a certain amount. That's like a price ceiling. So the true equilibrium becomes binding because the true equilibrium price might have been $50, but the actual price that the market is allowed to take place at, if it was the government, then it would be a price ceiling, then it would be binding. Price ceilings are lower prices that cause shortages. So here's an example graphically. So without any regulation, the equilibrium would be, this is like a rent control example, would be 1,000. And the equilibrium price is 3,000 without a price ceiling. So without any regulation, in equilibrium, 1 million studio apartments are rented at $3,000 per month. Good. Just run through all these slides. So now with the price ceiling is established at $2,000 per month. This is now a binding price ceiling because the equilibrium wants to be here at A, but we're not allowed to sell any higher than this price ceiling. All right, so now we have a binding price ceiling in this market. Consumers demand 1.1 million. That's the quantity demanded at the price ceiling. Suppliers are willing to rent 950,000. That's the quantity supplied at the price ceiling. We get a shortage because the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied, right? The actual price is going to be $2,000. The actual equilibrium would be $3,000. There would be no shortage at at a price of $3,000, but there is a shortage at the price of $2,000 because you've got a lot more people wanting to rent an apartment than you have sellers wanting to make apartments available. So this leads to a shortage of 150,000 apartments. All right. So which of the following is a price ceiling? Government lifts the number of refugees entering the country. No, that'd be like removing some type of quota. FDA limits the price of new high blood pressure to $100 per pill. Yeah, that's a price limit. It's a price control. Joy smokes cigarettes every day. Yeah, so that's a tax. That's not a price ceiling. So if the FDA restricts the particular price to $100 a pill, that's a price ceiling. All right, so price floors, when regulation forces higher prices. So the binding price floor is a price floor that prevents the market from reaching the equilibrium price. So the lowest price that sellers can charge is above the equilibrium price, meaning that the true price is somewhere down below the floor, but the price floor is not allowing the market to go any lower. So what's the problem? This raises the price and then ultimately lowers the quantity actually sold. So here's an example. So here we have, I don't know, suppose there be a price floor on, in this is like the market for beer, okay? So here's the equilibrium price without a price floor, right? And then, I don't know why they didn't use just labor, but okay, fine. It used to be labor. So the consumers demand 13 billion cans per year at this price. So, sorry. I'm getting distracted by my dislike for this example. So, all right, so here's the market. It's the equilibrium quantity was 15. The equilibrium price was $1. They've imposed a minimum price of $1.50 on this market. At this price of $1.50, the quantity demanded is only 13. The quantity supplied is going to be 17. So we've got a surplus of 4 because the quantity supplied at the price floor price is bigger than the quantity demanded at the price floor price, right? So the surplus of 4 billion cans, meaning producers would be willing to produce and sell 4 billion more cans than they're prevented from doing so by the government. All right, good. So which of the following is the example of a binding price floor? Minimum wage in New York City is $15, which is below the market wage for many industries. Well, that's a wage, that's a price, and it's a price floor. But it's not a binding price floor because we're told the minimum wage is $15 and the market wage is much higher. And so therefore, it's not having an effect on the market. Sugar processors in the United States are required to pay farmers at least a minimum amount per pound of sugar. Yes, that would be the best example for a binding price floor. OPEC limits the production of oil to set a certain international price. This is limiting the production is like a quantity control, so that's why it's not a price control, because they're limiting the production so that the price gets set. It's actually, OPEC is an oligopoly. They choose how much each country is able to produce, and then this, by virtue of restricting or flooding the market, however they want to determine the quantity, it affects the market price. That's how that works. I don't know. So this one, I can say A is clearly not correct because we're told we have a minimum wage, but it's below the market wage. So that means the equilibrium wage is higher than the minimum wage, then it's not binding. We need to know a lot more about this one to know that that's not, okay, fine. So I'll have to talk with Justin. So, all right. So quantity regulations, analyze the consequences of quantity regulations, a minimum and maximum quantity that can be sold. And so this would be like a mandate, a requirement to buy or sell some minimum amount of the good. A quota would be a limit on the maximum quantity of the good that can be sold. So a mandate would be you have to produce at least this amount. Quota is you can produce no more than this amount, or buy and sell or whatever. So here's the maximum quantity restriction. So if there's no regulation, the equilibrium price, for instance, per house is $400,000. The equilibrium price is $400,000. The equilibrium quantity of thousands of houses is 700. All right, so where supply equals demand, it's at 700. Suppose zoning laws impose a maximum quantity of 300,000 houses. Okay, that's here. This is the maximum quantity. We draw this now vertically because there can't be any larger quantity than this amount. So this becomes the market quantity. How much are sellers? What's this price that sellers are willing to agree to? What's the price that buyers are willing to agree to? Right? Buyers are willing to pay up to $600,000 for houses. Sellers are willing to produce if the price is at least 200,000, right? Sellers are willing to sell above here. Buyers are willing to pay up to here, right? Competition among buyers probably pushes the price up to 600,000. Why? Well, we wanted 700,000 houses. There's only 300,000 houses. So that's probably going to compete the price up because we've got scarcity relative to how much people want. So this quantity regulation should force competition. So quantity regulation is saying equilibrium would have been 700 at a price of 400,000. Quantity restriction is saying there can only be 300,000. Sellers are willing to produce if it's at least 200,000 is the price, but there's enough buyers who want houses that are more than 200 that are willing to pay more than $200,000 that'll rise it up to 600,000. All right, so that's the quota example. We restrict the quantity, and then the price gets competed up because of scarcity. Consider the following quotas. So immigration quotas effectively limit the supply of workers. So the idea would be if we restrict the supply of workers, they should compete up wages because of scarcity. China lets family have a maximum of 2 children, right? Trade quotas limit the number of certain goods that can enter the country. Custom regulations limit the kind and amount of souvenirs you can bring back from abroad. Okay. Government has capped the number of medical residents or doctors in training that it funds. That drives up the wages for doctors. All right. Yeah. So we've got lots of quotas, lots of examples. Okay. So which of the following is a quota? Well, it's the first one. Let's see why it's not the other ones. So the OPEC sets an official production cap. Yeah, that's a quota. That's a limit on production. So moving to apartment building, rent control. Nope, we saw that was a price control. Once the trendiest sneakers available at the department store finds that they're already sold out. No, I mean, there's a lot of stories that could cause that. All right. So here's the key takeaways. Economic burden is determined by price elasticities of supply and demand, not by the statutory burden of tax or subsidy. Taxes are reduce the quantity, raise the price buyers pay, reduce the price sellers receive. Subsidies reduce or increase the quantity, reduce the price buyers pay, and increase the price sellers receive. Price ceilings are maximum prices sellers can charge, and they reduce the quantity sold and create shortages. Price floors are minimum prices that sellers can charge, and they reduce the quantity sold and create surpluses. Quotas are the maximum that are allowed to be sold, and then taxes, price regulations, quantity regulations can all achieve the same policy objectives. Distributional consequences across buyers and sellers differ. Okay, very good. So if you made it this far, I'm going to link up my other lectures on this one to kind of reinforce what we've got. I've got a video I like better on price controls. I'll link that up after this one. And then I'll link up my taxes video in the site as well. So anyway, hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you in the next one.